Hey, boys and girls, this is Mr. Bell, Mr. Bell's Math. Welcome to another edition of Mr. Bell's Math. All right, today we're going to talk about percents, fractions, and decimals. Our essential question, let me go ahead and follow along here. Our essential question says, how can you write equivalent percents, fractions, and decimals? So real quick, I just want to remind you that the word equivalent just means equal. So if we write a percent, there's an equal fraction that goes with it, and there's an equal decimal that goes with it as well. Okay, so make sure you remember that. It says you can write a percent as an equivalent fraction or as an equivalent decimal. Equivalent percents, decimals, and fractions all represent equal parts of the same whole. And just to give you a quick example, I have this circle here that I drew that I just want to kind of go over with you and show you how it works. So say I got this circle, I divided it into 4 equal pieces. Let's pretend they're equal. And I shaded one of those parts in. Okay, so we can say that out of that circle, 1/4 of that circle is shaded, right? And that's pretty obvious because I have 4 parts, one of them shaded, so 1 out of 4 is 1/4. Okay, well, we can also say that 25% of that circle is shaded. Okay, and let's just pretend that circle was $1. That may be a stretch, but if I have 25% or if I have 1/4 of $1, I think immediately of quarters, and I have 0.25 cents. Okay, so all 3 of these, written 3 different ways, is equal to the same amount. It all represents this portion of the circle that we have shaded in. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind when we're talking about this stuff. So let's look at an example, and then we're going to do a couple. It says you could, no, I already read that. Lorenzo spends 35% of his budget on rent for his apartment. All right, let me get the pointer tool so we can follow along. Write this percent as a fraction and as a decimal. Okay, so it says write the percent as a fraction. So that's the first thing we're going to do. 35% of his budget. Okay, well, since percent means per 100 or out of 100, the easy thing to do is write any percent as a fraction. Okay, because all you have to do is take the percent minus the percent sign and stick it in a fraction over 100, and that's it. So 35 over 100, 35 hundredths, is the same as 35%. All right, then it says write the fraction in simplest form. Okay, yeah, you definitely want to simplify it. In this case, we can divide both the top and the bottom by the greatest common factor, which is 5. And 35 divided by 5 is 7. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 7/20 is also the exact same thing as 35%. Okay, exact same thing. Then it says write the percent as a decimal. All right, so since it's 35 out of 100, and the 100 tells you how many decimal places there are. So if it's 35 hundredths, 35 hundredths just means 35 over 100. 35 over 100. So that decimal is easy to come up with because you just write 35 hundredths as a fraction. 35 over 100. Okay, so down here it says, so 35% is written as the fraction 7/20, and written as a decimal, it is 0.35. Easy peasy. All right, so let's look at a couple examples. It says write each percent as a fraction and as a decimal. So 15%, and I'm going to go through this pretty quick because it's pretty easy. So the first thing, writing it as a fraction, 15% per 100, 15 over 100. Okay, writing it as a decimal, this is super easy. You just move the decimal 2 places to the left, and my decimal equivalent is 0.15. Okay, number 2, 48%. Once again, 48 per 100. So that's my decimal. To write it as a, and I'm not simplifying these. I'm just doing it really quick. But I could simplify. Let me just kind of simplify this over here real quick. I can divide both of these by 5, and that'll give me 3/20. Okay, so that's also equivalent. I can divide this one here by, well, let's go ahead and turn it into a decimal first because that's like super easy. Okay, all right, 48. If I don't know the greatest common factor for 48 over 100, then I can divide by 2. Okay, and I can get 24 over 100. which is not over 100, would be 50. Okay, 24 over 50, I can still divide that by 2 and get 12 over 25. Okay, so that would also be equivalent to this, and equivalent to this, and equivalent to that. Okay, 80%, easy. Written as a fraction is 80 over 100. I immediately see I can divide this by 10, and that would be the same as 8 over 10. If I divide the top by 10, I'd lose one of those zeros, or lose the 0. If I divide the bottom by 10, I lose one of the zeros. Okay, so 8/10. But I can still divide this by 2. All right, so 8 divided by 2 is 4, and then 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I have 4/5 as my simplified fraction. 80% as a decimal is 0.80, because I just took this number and moved the decimal 2 places to the left. All right, but I don't need this 0 on the end, so I can eliminate it. There it is. So 0.8, same thing. 75%, 75 over 100. All right, I can divide both the top and bottom of this by 25. Okay, you might not see that right off. You might just see the 5. But if I divide 25 by 5, I get 3. If I divide 100 by 25, I get 4. So 3/4 is the same thing as 75%, or 75 out of 100. And then my decimal, once again, move the decimal 2 places to the left, and I get 0.75. Let me show you one more quick example where I have, let's just say 125%. Okay, because this works for any number, whether it's, and I'll show you one that's less than 2 digits, but this is more than 2 digits. So the fraction equivalent would be 125 over 100, because we're talking about percent. Okay, the decimal equivalent, well, I can actually divide this by 25. Let's do that first. 125 divided by 25 is 5, and then 100 divided by 25 is 4. So my answer is basically 1 1/4. Okay, so that'd be my fraction equivalent. And then if I were to turn this into let me use a different color, turn this into a decimal, because it's a percent, I'm moving the decimal 2 places, so my decimal equivalent is 1.25. And that's the same thing as 1/4. That's the same thing as 5/4. That's the same thing as 125 hundredths. So all these are equal. All right, next one. It says you can write some fractions as percents by writing an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100. Okay, now that method's really useful when the fraction has a denominator that is a factor or a multiple of 100. If it doesn't have a factor or multiple of 100, then you have to use long division. Okay, so here's a couple examples I'm going to show you. I'm doing okay on time. I got to hurry up. But it says, let me get my pointer, 96 out of 200 animals treated by a veterinarian are horses. Write 96 200ths as a decimal and as a percent. So first thing, if I want to write it as a decimal, or well, let's start with a percent. Well, it's starting with a decimal. Okay. But if I want to write it as a decimal, okay, I need to get a denominator of 100. So I had to divide 200 by 2, okay, divided by 2. That gives me 100, so I got to divide 96 by 2, and that gives me 48. All right, so 48 100ths. Now that's the fraction I can work with in order to turn it into a percent and a decimal. So 48 100ths. I just move the decimal 2 places to the left, and that gives me 0.48. All I have to do is basically drop the decimal and add a percent, and that gives me my percentage. Okay, so super easy. And then this one here is when you don't have a multiple. So 1/8 of these animals treated by the veterinarian are dog. Write 1/8 as a decimal and as a percent. So here in the first example, it says use long division to divide the numerator by the denominator. All right, so I'm going to kind of talk about that. Remember, when you have 1/8 and you set up the division, you're dividing the top by the bottom. So 1 goes on the inside, 8 goes on the outside. 1 won't go into 8. I can hear you all already going, Mr. Bell, I can't do that. 8 won't go into 1. It's too small. Add a decimal. Add a 0. All right, 8 won't go into 1, but 8 will go into 10 one time. Okay, 8 times 1 is 8. I subtract, I get 2. Add a 0, bring it down, 8 will go into 20 2 times. That's 16. I subtract, I get a 4. Bring that 0. I added a 0, brought it down. 8 will go into 45 times. Okay? And that's what we wind up with, a 0.125. So now if I were to take this decimal here, all right, and write it as a percent, okay, the first thing I want to do is write it over whatever it tells me to. So it's 0.125. If I read that as a number, it would be 125 thousandths. So 125 thousandths, when I set it up as a decimal, it just goes over 1,000 because that's what the decimal tells me. All right. So in order to turn it into a fraction we can use to turn it into a percent, we have to get it over 100. Okay. So in order to do this, I have to divide by 10. Divide by 10. 1,000 divided by 10 is 100. 125 divided by 10 is, guess what, 12.5. And I know this because if you divide by a power of 10, all you have to do is move the decimal the same number of zeros that are in that power of 10. In this case, we only have 1, so the decimal moves one place from here to here. And that gives me 12.5. So now that I have 12.5 over 100, okay, I can easily turn it into a percent. I get rid of the fraction bar, get rid of the 100, and I just put a percent on the end. Okay, so 125 thousandths is the same as 12.5%, and it's the same as 12.5 over 100, or 0.125 over 1,000. All right, let's look at a couple examples. 9/25ths, we want to turn them into, or convert them into equivalent fractions, decimals, and as percents. Or not, it's already a fraction, but as a decimal and a percent. So, all right, let's go with the blue. And I got 9 over 25. The first thing I want to do is get it as a fraction over 100. Okay, this one I can do that way because it's 25. All right, so if I multiply 25 times 4, that just means I have to do that with the 9 as well. And then 25 times 4 is 100. 9 times 4 is 36. So here's my fraction equivalent. Okay, and to turn it into a decimal, I divide 36 by 100. Decimal point moves 2 places, so my decimal equivalent is 36. So 36 over 100 and 0.36. Now, this fraction, it doesn't say in the problem to turn it into a fraction in simplest forms, but you would always want to do that. Okay, so we can divide 36 by 2, or actually we can divide it by 4 and get 9 over 25, and that would be our simplest form fraction. Okay, next one is 7/8. Now I can't turn 7/8 into a decimal or into a fraction with 100 in the denominator. I can't do it, not easily anyway. So I have to use long division in order to figure out what the decimal equivalent is, and then it's easy to go from there to a percent. Okay, so once again, top number goes on the inside, bottom number goes on the outside. I can't divide 8 into 7, so I have to turn it into a decimal. 8 won't go into 70, so I put a 0 there, and 7, but 8 will go into 70 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. I subtract, I get a 6. All right, I want to say 8 will go into, whoops, I got to bring the 0 down. 8 will go into 60 7 times. That's 56. I subtract, I get 4. Add another 0, bring it down. 8 will go into 40 5 times. Okay, so my decimal equivalent of 7/8 is 0.875, or 875 thousandths. Okay, that's how you read that decimal. So I can easily turn it into a fraction because I know what the denominator is just by the name of the fraction, or name of the decimal rather. So to turn this into a fraction that'll help me get a percent, I have to get it over 100. So 875 thousandths is equal to some number over 100. So I have to divide by 10, and I divide this by 10. 1,000 divided by 10 is 100. 875 divided by 10 is 87.5. So now I can take this and turn it into a percent very easily because it's per 100. So 87.5 as a percent is 87.5. So 87.5